Alright, so for this video, I'm going to be critiquing Nintendo's controllers throughout the years, starting with the NES and going all the way to the Switch. Nintendo's controllers are so weird because they always try to innovate with them, but there's always a few elements that they stick with between the iterations. Like, let's just start the NES, and I'll explain all that bullshit later. But this is the NES controller. Very basic, obviously. It's one of the only ones that has like a stylized design, I think. This was made for the American market. The Famicom controller, I think, is very different. I mean, the buttons are the same, of course, but the actual design is meant to look like a remote, kind of. Like, it's supposed to look like you can control Rob with this thing, I'm guessing. That's what they're going for. Because looking at it, it's very odd. I like the burst, little bits of red. Adds a lot to the controller. The gray is a little bit faded on the bottom. It's yellowing and stuff. Thinking about like the controller's like qualities, the D-pad isn't that great. It's okay. I have another NES controller that is a lot worse than this. Like the buttons are pretty good on this one, but on that one the buttons are like mush. There's this weird texture on the faceplate, I guess, that I can't really describe. Like it's almost like felt, but not really at all like that. Yeah, so it's an okay controller. It looks way better in the camera than it does in real life. I think the colors pop out more when it's lit up. So the next controller is the Super Nintendo controller. This one made a lot of changes that were really great. I think all of the buttons are different. Let's see. The only buttons that are shared between these two, like the original versions of, I guess, I don't know how to explain this, but the parts they use, like these two buttons and the buttons here are the same, but even though it looks like it, the D-pad is actually updated, and I vastly prefer this one. For this one, it's a lot bigger and it's a lot less sharp. Not that much bigger, but it's more sharp, so it like it feels way better to like move it around. When with the NES one, it's just sometimes it's like a nightmare. I think the start and select buttons are bigger on the SNES controller. They still have that rubbery feeling. This one, the SNES controller is L and R buttons, which the NES one did not. So that's a little cool thing. It also has X and Y buttons. So the shape is also really good. Like I have the Super Nintendo controller. No one's really gonna fault you for saying that it's basically flawless. Like, there's really no problems with it. For like 2D games, this is like the design they use for everything. Weirdly enough, Nintendo's handhelds never took from the Super Nintendo controller. They mostly borrowed from the NES controller. Like the Game Boy uses this D-pad, these buttons, and the start and select, which is so weird. Like they used this D-pad in handheld controllers for a long time, but I think they might have updated a little bit. But those are the first two. Then we have everyone's favorite punching bag, the Nintendo 64 controller. I always thought it was interesting how they reused the D-pad, because it feels like the N64 controller is way bigger, but it kind of puts into perspective how similar they are. Like design-wise, besides the added functions. This one has a really bland design. Like, you see this devolution with the Super Nintendo to the NES, and the NES to the Super Nintendo, where they sort of add less details. Like there's a little bit of a circle there, which is kind of cute, but it's almost entirely just gray. Like they really could have just like added that there, like some sort of detail there to make it look cooler. But then with the N64, they just go all out and it's just gray, and it's just kind of boring. Everyone complains about the stick. The stick isn't the best. Like, you can kind of just tell how it feels by just hearing that. Like, that's not a good sound. The Z trigger is alright. It's kind of a unique thing. You never really think about, like, other consoles that have, like, one trigger there. It's really unique and used differently in a lot of games. Like, it makes, I don't know, like, when you use this to, like, shield or whatever in Super Smash Brothers, it feels different than just busting out the L and R buttons. Because those almost feel like the fact that they're interchangeable is fine, but it almost makes me feel like I'm doing the wrong button. Like, there's, like, should be a definitive one. The start button's weird. This is the first time they did a button. There's no select, just start. The buttons are colored. The A and B buttons are all right. These just look odd. Like there's something about them. The C stick, or not the C stick. The C buttons are okay. It's just the buttons. I don't know. Something's always just felt off about them. Cause I never like. It's hard to explain, but like when I'm holding the controller, I never think about the buttons. Like, I always think like there's so many games that just like don't use the C buttons. I don't even know where I'm going with this. It just the buttons on the N64 controller aren't the best. The L and R buttons are a weird evolution from the Super Nintendo. Like they're very similar. In function they're the same. They're a little clickier, I'd say. They're a different color, which is the only bit of darker gray or like a different grayscale that they use. They do embroider the Nintendo logo, which is kind of cool. The Super Nintendo one does not do that; it just prints it, and the original Nintendo one doesn't do that either. So that's neat, I guess. There's a giant section in the back for putting in a rumble pack or a memory card or something. And this is a little bit annoying, but one thing I do like about it is that it makes it so like tying up the controller is a little easier because there's more form when there's like constrictions like that. Obviously, there's the people duking on the controller for only being able to use 2 of the handles. That was confusing at first, but you get used to it easily. Like I remember Super Smash Brothers. Like it was one of the I think it was the first Smash game besides Melee that I really played all too much. Because I went back with Super Smash Brothers. It was super weird. I guess my experiences with it, but it took a while for me to realize you pressed up to jump. So I thought Kirby with his like up B was the only character who could jump. Very weird, but I don't know. It's okay. I didn't bring it out, but the Virtual Boy controller is a lot better than this. I actually prefer that one. You know, I could bring that up. I'll do that in the next video. The next 2 controllers are the GameCube and the Wavebird. These are famous for many reasons. They see the return of a few functions, like this crappy D-pad comes back. It's a little different. It's the updated version from the Game Boy Advance, but it is really bad. Like, so bad. I don't know, it just feels like you're fighting against it whenever you're moving it, which I don't like. I like the Super Nintendo one because it feels like you're like moving. Like, I don't know. The analog stick is amazing. It feels good. It pops out a little bit. And then pops back in. I don't know, like, why it does that. The L and R buttons are wonderful. They make a little bit of an unsatisfying click. I kind of wish, like, they make this weird wheezing sound a little bit. The Z button has that feel of the Super Nintendo's, of the N64 buttons. I guess the GameCube also has that plasticky, weird feel, but the shapes of the buttons are far better. Like, for this one, it's just very flat, but the A button has a bit of a curve, it feels like, when you're holding it. The way they put the buttons around to make them better is really cool. I just wish that it was easier to differentiate the X and Y buttons. Like, I don't know how they could have done that. Maybe they would make it so one side of the little bean shape is flat, so you could, like, feel for that. But it's not the end of the world. This is a great control. Like, those are great buttons. The start button has been minimized. It's still there, but it's smaller instead of being the size of the other ones. What is this similar to? It kind of looks like the 3DS C stick. I don't know, it's very small. There's still no select button. I guess they gave up on that idea. I think almost every Nintendo handheld has a select button, but for a while the consoles just gave up on that idea. The C stick is good. I like this. It feels very comfortable. This is a great controller. And then we have the Wavebird. The Wavebird is also cool. It's wireless. Doesn't have rumble, but it has this big back section, which is a little bit annoying because if you hold it, I feel like my hands are like rubbing up against this and it's not 100% perfect. Like if they edged it off a little bit to give your hands more room, I'd say this is the best controller, but like it has wireless, so obviously it is the best controller if you're not like a weirdo who cares about bullshit like the slight inconvenience of like one feeling. But I don't know. I do like the original GameCube controller more, and because I'm going to be standing right next to the TV anyway, or sitting, I just use this one most of the time, even though I do have multiple Wavebirds or whatever. The next controller is the... Actually, I should probably get an... Oh, shit. Yikes. Okay, that's not cool. My god, I've not looked down, and the wires are bad. Alright. I'll fix that. The next controller is the Wiimote. The Wiimote is polarizing. Basically, everything on it is brand new. The D-pad's brand new. The A button is a little similar to the GameCube one, but is overall new. The buttons here are clickier. The 1 and 2 buttons are different. It's and the B button is weird. It's kind of like an iconic shape, like just having it be there. But overall, everything's new because it was a revolution. Like they completely redesigned the controller to be accessible to everyone. I'm gonna talk about the buttons first. The D-pad is really good. I don't know, it's hard. You don't really use it that much. I mean, you do, I guess, in 2D games or whatever. But it's a good D-pad, and don't really think about it that much. The A button is clear, which is an interesting decision. I don't know why they did this. It looks a little cool, but I don't know. Oh, there actually is a big difference. The plastic they use is way more reflective, I guess, and shinier. I remember they said in an interview that they wanted the Wii to feel more premium, so they took the plastic they were using in the older consoles and gave it a new sheen, so it has a different look to it. It's more sparkly, you know. There's a microphone, which is weird. This is the return of the select button. It took a few years, but they brought it back. But they simplified it to a plus or minus button, so it would be more similar to a TV remote with audio and channel controls. You have 1 and 2 buttons, which are supposed to look which are numbers because it's like a keypad. This whole thing is just a guise to sort of look like a TV remote, which is the theme. It even has the sensor there. And it is clever that they didn't make it so that gimmick was too intrusive. Of course, motion controls in some games are very annoying. I hate waggle because when you're shaking the Wiimote, it's kind of hard to get your bearings right away. So you sort of leave yourself open. As weird as that sounds, I think that's only a me thing because it's a little bit. I hate just stop shaking it. I hate how you have to shake it for I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like I don't know how much I should shake it. Am I supposed to go crazy or just a slight twist? What isn't enough? There's no barrier. When you're pressing a button, you know that button's pressed. But when you're shaking it, you don't really get it. It's like if you had to press every button super hard for it to work, or you thought you did. It's a weird placebo effect. This controller has a power button, which is new. It just turns off the console, which is convenient. Has a jacket to feel better. I think it's kind of a weird look because you have to constantly take this thing in and on and out. This has Wii Motion Plus, which is wonderful. It allows games like Fling Smash to work better. It's required for Skyward Sword. It makes Pikmin 3 better. I do like Wii Motion Plus, and pointer controls in general are amazing. I wish they brought those back or had other games that focus on them. I'm gonna get the... Oh my god, I made the same mistake twice. I'm gonna get the nunchuck. This is the companion to the Wiimote. the Nunchuck, as it's called. The weird thing about the Nunchuck is that it's actually called the Numchuck. Like, it's Numchuk, spelled with just a K and no CK. So the name was really stupid. I don't know what it means. Is it supposed to look like nunchucks? Like, you go like that? Like, that's stupid. But it works. Has a new Z button, which is a giant square, and a C button. These were always confusing. When I was little, I didn't know the Z button existed, even though it's pretty big. It has that trigger. It almost has that trigger feeling of the N64, but the shape of this thing is very sleek. I like the shape. You can see the differences in plastic, where they have that like normal N64-esque matte finish, then they have the glossy shininess on the front. I like the contrast. I think they should have gone with this, because it makes it stand out more, because otherwise it just kind of looks weird. Like when it's just there, like, I don't know. I like the Nunchuck. The analog stick is also really good. One thing I do have problems with this controller is that it drifts, but I mean, there's the Joy-Cons that are famous for drifting, but with these controllers, it's a little bit different, because you can just unplug it and plug it back in, and almost 9 times out of 10, the analog stick just works perfectly again. So, unlike the Switch, where like you have to either recalibrate, and sometimes that doesn't even work. So, it's not a problem with the Wiimote for me. I mean, it might become worse in the future. I've had multiple Nunchucks that have done I'm going to call them Nunchucks. Nunchuck is stupid. There's no M. I've had multiple of these do this, so I think it isn't an isolated issue. But the Wiimote is cool. It's a nice, unique take on a controller. And I wish more were like this, but the Wii inspired bad trends that weren't cool, even if the controller itself was solid. The next controller is the Fat, with a PH, the Fat Wii U Gamepad. This thing is a bit of a mess. It has a lot of things going for it, but also it has a lot of bad things. It's very similar to the 3DS and the Wiimote combined. You have the analog sticks from the Wii. Oh, it's too close. You have the analog. Oh god, I want to show off the beautiful Wii U gamepad. You have the analog sticks from the Wii. Buttons that are a bit of a mix of the 3DS ones in layout and tech. Like, the font they use is the one from the 3DS, but the feel is very similar to the classic controller, I guess. Oh my god, I'm about to move this light. Yeah, that's better. Is it? No, it's not. The start and select buttons are... They actually write start and select. It isn't just plus and minus, so they're acknowledging it. You've got the power button returning. The TV button, which is so stupid, but I love it. It makes it so the Wii U gamepad turns on as a TV remote. This was heavily advertised before the Wii U came out, but I've never seen a single person use this feature. Very strange. The whole development of the Wii U gamepad is so weird. It was inspired by the small feature in the Wii where the disc slot could have a blue light to show that there was an update for the system, and they wanted that to be more advanced. So instead of just having one light that can convey one message, they'd have the Wii U gamepad, and that's cute, but also really dumb. The Wii U has some of its own... Oh, I should go back to the buttons. I got distracted a little bit. Another analog stick here. The same D-pad from the Wii. Very good D-pad there. The Amiibo scanner. The Wii U logo. They didn't embroider the Nintendo logo into any other console, which isn't that big of a deal. I just realized that. They just put the word Wii U there, and then Wii on the Wiimote, GameCube on the GameCube. There's a camera here, which is really pointless and probably was expensive for them to put in. This is a really, like, just in general, like, I get why you put a camera into the 3DS, and they already had one, So I get why they try to apply that with the Wii U, because this thing is very 3DS-like, but you can't take photos with it. Like, I know you, like, obviously you probably wouldn't want to take photos with this thing, but, like, they never made it able to do that? Very strange. This controller is the first one Nintendo's made that has rechargeable battery out of the box. You have this charging port. There's also a headphone jack, which is, I think, the first for a Nintendo controller. There's this NFC thing, I think, sensor bar thing? I guess this is similar to the Wii. I never really thought about it, but it's definitely the same thing. Has a volume slider, and of course it has a stylus slot, because there's a touchscreen, which isn't utilized that much. The shoulder buttons are great. You get a bit of a return to this slanted Nintendo 64 style, where it's a lot more sleek and flat, which I think works for the L and R buttons. It's good. And the ZL and ZR buttons are right where your fingers are. It's a really good design there. And they have a bump on the back, so it really doesn't have that slight issue with the GameCube where your hand, like my hands have somewhere to go. It works. The Nintendo logo is there. No one else cares about that. The Wii U controller, the new controller, stupid, cool name. There's a few weird features like that are never used. Like this port on the bottom, never used for anything. This almost looks like I could screw into my tripod that I just got. Yeah, the Wii U is a strange controller. Has a lot of useless junk in it, but it's cool. I like it. I'll do a ranking for the controllers at the end of this video. And finally, one of my least favorite controllers Nintendo's made, the Joy-Cons. So these things also have a lot of new tech in them. These analog sticks are new. They are a bit like the circle pad in the 3DS, but elevated a little bit. These plus and minus buttons are cutouts. They're not just symbols. The A and B, XY buttons are from the 3DS. The home button I think might be from the 2DS of all things. These are the same as these buttons, the D-pad. Unpopular opinion, but I actually really like the button D-pad because it has a nice analog feeling to it where you can just hold this down and you're going right forever. Like, there's not, like, you can hold down multiple buttons, do multiple things. It's hard to explain, but it works for a lot of 2D games. I like it. You have a brand new screen capture button. I was really excited when the Switch was announced for this because I thought it would be like the PlayStation 4 where you can like record like video that was like substantial, but you can only get video that's like 30 seconds, so and bad quality, so it's kind of stupid. This top part is a condensed version of the Wii U. It's condensed, but that also means that the problems are sort of, or I guess the things that make it unique are way exaggerated. Like, the Wii U gamepad had kind of a bit of a flat L and R buttons, while the Switch has this extremely small strip that's like that, and this one's not as fat as the Wii U. This is just a very skinny Wii U gamepad. It lost some weight, but it also lost some comfortability. It's not as comfortable as the Wii U gamepad. It's okay. It's okay. These SL and SR buttons are terrible. They're like I feel like I'm squishing an ant whenever I touch them. These controllers do a lot of things, which is cool. They have motion controls built in. They have an IR pointer. But they're kind of lame because they're just whatever. They're just the most boring controller Nintendo's made, the Joy-Cons. And they don't function that well. Drifting is a huge problem, and they're never going to fix it. And in like 10 years, these things aren't going to work at all. With the Joy-Con grip, it is a better experience. There's this weird thing here. Like, I don't know why there's like a bit of a holder looking thing. Like, would you put this on like would you like hang this up on the Christmas tree? That is a little bit weird, but it's okay. The Joy-Con grip is okay. It works well when it's attached to the Switch as in handheld mode. It's an okay second controller to give to the second person with your Pro controller. It's okay. So let's do the ranking. The best controller Nintendo's ever made is probably the GameCube controller. Where is it? Oh shit. I must have put it somewhere. Where is it? The GameCube controller. This is tied with the Wavebird. The second best is probably, do I want to say the Wiimote? The Wiimote Nunchuck is really solid, honestly. I like the Wiimote Nunchuck. That's the second place. Third place would probably be the Wii U Gamepad. This thing has a lot of vestigial features that are useless, but as a controller used for normal games, it's actually really good. Like, I used it a lot in like I guess the Wii U's core games like Mario 3D World and whatever. It is a little weird how, oh my god, I'm getting back to talking about the controllers. It's a weird how there's like separates your hands so much, but I like it. It's a good controller. Next, fourth place, I think, is the Super Nintendo controller. Very solid. Not that many flaws. It's almost perfect. But it is basic, and the design, the visuals are kind of weird and bland, in a way. Then, next, this is a toughie, because the last three controllers are all, like, okay. I wouldn't say any of them were bad, but of these three last ones, the NES is functional. Very basic, but I think it gets a few points ahead because visually it is a very iconic design, and that's cool. Next is the Switch Joy-Cons. They're functional sometimes, and they're not confusing, but they have very little character, and they're fragile. And the worst is the N64 controller, because besides the D-pad, nothing in it feels great. This isn't a great feeling controller, and it doesn't accomplish anything special like the Switch one does. So I would say this is the worst controller. But you knew that already. No one really likes the N64 controller. Next video, I'll talk about the handhelds. Maybe I might do a little 2-second video about the Virtual Boy controller, because I have one of those. Bye.